Welcome back to the next episode in the Hunter Handbook series. My name is Dre, and in this video, I'll show you how to solo Dire Maul North tribute runs as a hunter. Let's get right into it. In order to complete these solo, there are a few things you're going to have prepared prior to starting the runs. First, you're going to want to have engineering to craft large Sephorium charges in order to blow through one of the final doors. You can also use powerful Sephorium charges, but they're not needed and honestly way more expensive to craft and use, so I'd recommend just large Sephorium. Secondly, you need to have lesser invisibility potions in order to skip a section of the dungeon, which we'll show later in the guide. You do have the option of using regular invisibility potions, but again, they're not required and they'll be more expensive to craft. Lastly, I would recommend bringing max rank bandages, food, and water. Keep in mind, after completing a run, you do get plenty of food and water from the tribute cache, but I would make sure to be stocked up on bandages at the minimum so the run goes smoother. Alright, before we hop into the guide, I just quickly wanted to cover the spec, as I'm assuming somebody's going to be asking in the comments if I'm not showing this. So in my runs, I'm currently running a 31-20 build. This is very similar to kind of like a pre-bis rating spec. The only thing I changed was maybe the 2 out of 2 improve aspect of the hawk, and I threw that into 2 out of 2 improve feign death. This by far is the most important talent I think in this whole build, as honestly you're going to be getting resists throughout your runs. It happens, it's bad RNG, and without this 2 out of 2, the amount of resists you get is super high, and for most of them, a resist means that you are going to wipe. There's only a few situations where you're able to actually survive a resist, so I would say well worth talenting into improve feign death. Now, there are a few people that have been speccing into Beast Mastery, picking up points in Endurance Training, Thick Hide, Improve Revive Pet for those quick revives, and also Pathfinding for mobility. I was running the spec, and it really didn't save me that much time overall. I really like having True Shot Aura, and I like being able to cover a lot of the talents in the survival tree. This also kind of saves you from having to respec when you go to raid, so I'd say overall, 31-20 build should be no problem. You'll do fine in raiding, and you'll do fine in tribute. Quick gear check as well. I'm running 2 out of 8 Giant Stalker. Everything else is pretty much pre-bis aside from a couple items. I do have Lock Delar and Rock Delar, and I'm also using the Tarnished Elven Rings, which if you don't have them already, soon enough after watching the guide you should be able to pick them up yourself through the tribute cache. Okay, so now that we're into the instance, I normally just put my pet on stay at the start, or you just don't have to have a pet out at all. And as you run through here, you're just going to scatter shot this mob, and you're going to jump onto this invisible ledge. Just quickly jump up and you're on the lip. Now these here are used to actually de-aggro mobs. While you're on these edges, mobs can't attack you. The ranged ones can hit you, but if you just LOS behind one of these pillars, they won't be able to hit you at all. So what we're doing here is I'm just hanging out behind this pillar here. The mob on the left you can see is still aggroed, and we're just waiting for him to drop. He dropped, so now we drop down, summon our pet, and set it on stay. I placed a frost trap as well. Now this is a move that we're going to be using throughout the whole dungeon. It's where you set your pet to stay at a certain point, you send it in to gain aggro, and then you put it on passive, which just essentially recalls it back to its stay position. Now if you're able to get enough distance from your pet in its stay location, instead of the pet dying, it actually just despawns, which saves you a ton of time instead of having to re-res your pet. Now when doing this, you will always have to feign death at some point to drop the mob aggro off you so that they don't actually transfer over to you. So as you can see, I just feigned death there. I looted the courtyard key, and I'm just staying left here to try and avoid any of the packs on the right. Now I'm pointing my cursor up on the top left. That's actually a book location, so it's one area that you can take a look for each time. Now I put track demons here because in these hallways we're going to be looking out for these eyes. The eyes will float around, they just kind of have a pat. There's 2 that we're going to have to worry about, and if they are not killed and they're able to get their summon off, they actually summon a kind of an all-seeing Void Walker that then you're not able to sneak past. So as you can see the eyes coming up, it begins summoning, but I just kill it. So that's the first one down. So all I'm doing here is just topping up my pet, making sure it's full, and I'm pulling it back and setting it to stay so it's as far back as possible. I then once again send the pet in, trying to get aggro on the mobs, and then pull it back once I see it gaining aggro. This allows me to easily run by. The odd time you might get maybe an AoE debuff or something put on you, but the mob shouldn't be aggroing onto you. I quickly hit a Feign Death, and because I outranged my pet, I could easily just resummon it without having to res it. Now I'm just topping it back up, and essentially I'm just waiting here. You're going to be doing this throughout the whole dungeon. You're essentially just waiting for your Feign Death to come back up. Now you see me clicking on one of the carrion swarmers down in the hall. There is a spot here that you can actually skip and essentially pull the swarmers with this next pack, and you can run through. I'm showing kind of the safest route to make sure that, you know, the run's as clean as possible and you guys can make any sort of changes. So all I've done here is send my pet in, grabbed aggro. One of them actually swapped aggro onto me, but I'm just trying to get into this small hallway here and feign death. The pet actually wasn't able to get far enough away, so it did die here, but as long as you get the feign death off in the right position, you'll have no problems. Most of the time on this, you should be able to just get a feign death, and your pet should reset based on distance, so you won't have to res here, but you can get unlucky and the pet won't be able to travel far enough. So once again, I'm kind of waiting for that feign death, and I'm just topping up my pet and my mana to make sure I'm ready for the next pull. This part essentially can be skipped. As I said before, you can pull your pet right into these bugs and then pull it right out, pulling both packs back to back. And there are a lot of skips throughout this dungeon, but to be honest, a lot of times you're saving maybe the 30-second cooldown on the feign death because you're just saving one extra feign death, and if it ends up leading to your death, it's not worth it. So I'm sending my pet into the bug here, and then I'm targeting the Reaver behind us and sending my pet back to the Reaver, that way that it gets as much distance away from me as possible. As you can see, then the pet de-aggros and I'm able to get around the corner. This is kind of the point where you're going to want to feign death. So at this corner here, there is a pat. I marked it here with Skull. He will come around the corner in a second. Now, something to keep note of, if you're a night elf, you can easily just shadow meld here and you don't have to worry about it at all. You kind of have a huge advantage being a night elf, and here is actually the eye coming around. So this is something you want to focus on. This is a second eye that you have to worry about. Once you kill both of them, you don't have to worry about them again. Now, if you're not a night elf, I kind of decided to just show you guys in the video here and slow my run down a bit. When the pad is coming on your right here, you just shuffle over to the left side of the pillar, and then as he's crossing, you essentially shuffle over to the right side. So this is how you would do it if you're not a night elf. The next pad is fairly simple. You just scatter shot the closest mob, and then I put a concuss on the farther mob to make sure I can get over here, and I feign death with cheetah up. You're going to want to pop a lesser invisibility pot, as you see here, and make sure cheetah's on before, so that way when you stand up, you're just popping the pot and beginning to run. You can follow the same route that I'm running here, and I'm just essentially running up and trying to get to the top as soon as possible. You're safe once you're on this landing here. I resummon my pet, I'm topping it up once again, and I'm going to go put it in a stay position that will be able to recall. So I'm just dragging my pet back. Be careful not to get too close to the right side of this landing. You actually will pull the mobs at the bottom of the ramp. So the pet is on stay, and I've actually quickly on my keybinds just swapped the explosive charge over to a keybind. You are going to want to be not clicking this item, so you can either bind it, or if you want, just quickly swap it onto a bind that's easily accessible. So I'm sending my pet in. We just want to pull the pack that's at the door, and I've set a frost trap down to slow the mobs as they run through. So once the mobs get aggro, I pull the pet back, run over to the door, and then we're going to use a Sephorium charge on the door in order to blow it. It's a large Sephorium charge. You can use the powerful ones as well, but there's no point. The large Sephoriums are a lot cheaper to make. So the pet's de-aggroed, and I'm able to feign death, and we're all set. So I'm essentially doing, once again, waiting that 30-second cooldown for feign death. My pet actually took barely any damage because I put the AoE slow trap down, so he's in pretty good shape. I back him up to the corner here and set him on stay again. These are definitely things you're going to want to have keybound. I mean, you can click if you want, but for the smoothness and efficiency of the run, I would just have your pet abilities bound. It makes your life a lot easier. So I'm just waiting for that timer again. I send the pet in to try and aggro the mobs, and as per usual, put it back on passive and run on by. Very simple, nothing too complex. You'll get very fluid and used to this after you spend hours and hours here, and the runs become smoother and smoother. And there definitely are some skips, like I mentioned earlier, that I'm not really doing, but this is kind of the safest route that you can take to make sure that you're not going to wipe. And as you run this more and more, you definitely will be able to run a few of those skips, and you'll get comfortable and you can kind of alter this. But I think in this video I'm giving you kind of a nice baseline overview of the run, and it should be a clean way for you to make sure that you can get to the end boss. So I'm just sending the pet in first to the guard and then to the farthest mob here. As per usual, sending it in, putting it on passive, and we're just going to run by. I throw a quick concussive shot on the captain just to make sure that he doesn't catch my pet to do extra damage. It really doesn't matter. You don't have to do that. Now I've marked this dog pack here. These are ones that ideally you're going to want to kill, and depending on the speed that you've actually progressed through the run, the dogs will be at a different point each time you show up here. Sometimes it will be in a great spot. Here's not bad because I know they're in a close area that I'm still going to be able to kill. But there are times where the dog packs are very far away and you're going to either have to wait or you're going to have to do like an alternate strat killing the final boss, which I don't think is really worth it. So I'm just waiting for the pack to come around, and then I'm going to open on them. Ideally, if you kill these three, your life is just so much easier. They become a huge pain later in the run, so it's well worth just executing them. So I'm just hitting him one with at least an aim shot multi-shot, and then I'm starting to spread serpent stings on all the targets. Ideally, we want to use this lip here as we can jump off and de-aggro the mobs, and it causes them to run all the way around. So we're kind of utilizing this lip here to kill the mobs. So most of the time I end up just tanking one down each time, and that way I can kind of smoothly take them out. These dogs do a ton of damage, so you definitely don't want to be getting hit by them. They will kill you in like 10 to 20 seconds. It's actually an absolute nightmare when they're hitting you and slowing you. So a lot of times if one's getting too close, you can just drop a scatter shot. As you see here, I scattered one and I'm just bursting the other one down. One dog left, and then we're good to go. Actually got a lucky concussive stun proc there, and it made the run a little bit easier. Just decided to go in and finish with a melee here, and we can clean it up. One thing you'll notice is it is very hard to be out of aggro in this area, because with the spirits that are up on the ledge above here, if they see you, you actually cannot drink or eat or do anything because they keep you in permanent aggro. So you kind of want to hug one of the walls and then feign death, and that way they can't see you from that line of sight, and that will allow you to make sure to drink up to full. So just getting ready for the fight. I threw True Shot Aura on, and I'm just prepping to get my pet in the proper position. There's a few ways you can do this, but to be honest, I just run my pet up and set it on stay. You can use Eyes of the Beast and walk them up there. There's ways where you can pull the boss and then bring your pet to you up here. But to be honest, I just walk my pet up. It's really not that much time saved, and I'm not going for record run times here. So you want to put your pet in the corner and set it on stay. And if you notice my trinkets here, I actually have a cloaking device. It's an engineering trinket. This actually becomes very valuable later in the fight, and it is well worth having. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but I wanted to bring your attention that if you are an engineer, which you probably should be to be able to blow the doors open, it's well worth having this item, and it can save your life many times during these runs. So I have called my pet to attack, and I'm just waiting to pull some aggro. So once I pull aggro, I immediately pull it back. I activate dash, and my pet's running back to the position. Now, in these fights, Cho will spawn with 3 variants. You're going to have the Fire Mage Cho, the Shaman Cho, and the Priest Cho. one thing you need to focus on is if it is not the Fire Mage Cho, you're gonna have to, as you see here, I put Viper Sting on Cho Rush there because he is the Shaman variant. Every time you can, you're going to be draining the Priest and the Shaman to make sure that they're at 0% mana. The reason we do this is because they will actually cast heals and end up healing Gordok, which is just going to make your runs longer and longer. So I wanted to throw that out there. Shaman and Priest, make sure you can get as much Serpent Stings as you can, or Viper Stings, sorry, early, and that way you're able to continue the fight. So the essential rotation that we're doing here is we attack the mobs as they get close to our pet to stop them from aggroing our pet, and then we wait for them to come all the way around, and by the time they get down, our Feign Death should be up, and then we can Feign Death, which will cause them to run back to our pet. Now I actually had an issue here, or for some reason Aggro transferred, so now I'm 21 seconds until my next Feign Death, and for some reason the mobs decided that they wanted to not aggro back on my pet. So this is exactly where I used Gnomish Cloaking Device. You say I hit that cloaking device there, I was able to actually essentially reset myself. It's a free Feign Death, and I procced just a new trinket since it's a 1 hour cooldown. But that right there, I would have had to, well actually I probably would have died if I didn't use that Gnomish Cloaking, so it is well worth it, and this honestly rarely happens, but the odd time it will. Now you have to be careful. There I popped a pot, and actually because of the pot I aggroed back, so there is a little bit of a weird aggro radius, and a lot of times when we Feign Death we're just going to want to sit and drink, not pop any pots. So as before, I want to tee up an aim shot, multi-shot, and Serpent Sting onto King Gordok. That causes him to run back, and then now I'm looking at Cho. I want to get an auto and a Viper Sting off. We're already down to 64% mana here. You normally can get one off, peek back out, that will cause him to cast again, and then you can get another Viper Sting off. He's already down to 55%, and I Feign Death to reset, and we just do it over and over again. I would say that the Priest is probably the hardest, as it hard casts heals and has shields, so the Priest is by far the most valuable one that you're going to want to be Viper Stinging, whereas the Fire Mage, all it is pure like fireball damage, so you don't have to worry about it at all. So that's essentially it on the fight. You're just juggling the mobs from top to bottom consistently with your Feign Death. After my Feign Death here, you see I just drink. It's well worth having the 55 Mage Water. You're able to get a ton of mana in those short periods, so when you only have 5 seconds to drink, having that best water available makes these runs so much smoother. I'm actually getting pretty low on mana here. But another Viper Sting out, and we're already at 25% mana on Cho, so he's about and throughout the fight you'll see me periodically just throwing them back on to make sure that we keep him down at 0%. Definitely an idea is making sure to connect with these mobs early. I've had times where I've waited till the last second, and it is not worth at all having the mobs connect with your pet. If your pet does die, pretty much this whole strat is ruined, and you're gonna have to kite around in a circle, get yourself back up top, and then res your pet and be able to park it there. And this can definitely happen. I've done it before in my runs, but it's not ideal, and you really don't want to be dealing with that. And here's where I get a little bit close with Cho, and he actually connects with my pet and puts it down to 15%. So this is why it's well worth attacking early. You don't want these bosses to connect with your pet. The whole strategy is contingent on your pet being alive, and if you let them get to it and they end up one-shotting it, your life is just an absolute nightmare. You do get a ton of water at the end of the tribute run, so don't be afraid to drink every time you Feign Death. if you need the mana, just take the time, even if it's 3 seconds, grab a couple sips and you're set. Now you are able to be a little bit more aggressive and chase Cho down, or chase Gordok down and do a little bit more DPS. I'm playing pretty passive here, but I just kind of wanted to make a clean and smooth run as possible. I'm not really going for speed. But I think this way at least highlights the strategy involved in order to solo this, and you guys should have no problem with a few runs of practice. There's that last Viper Sting. I have Cho down to 0% mana now, and then we're just left having to solo King Gordok. He does passively regen mana though, so you're going to want to make sure that you periodically check and just apply a Viper Sting when needed. So now that we burst the king down, the fight is completely over. Cho de-aggros and you're all covered. So you're going to want to run over and pick up your loot. This is where you get your barbarous blade from. So definitely is worth getting and keeping, as it's a great hunter weapon. You see I have one in my inventory right now. And then pretty much any further drops is just fantastic because you're able to get just a 7 gold vendor. Now before you talk to the ogre to get the tribute cache to spawn, you're going to want to actually make sure you run over and talk to the NPC first, because it actually will give you an extra blue in your tribute cache. A lot of people aren't talking to this NPC here, and without talking to Crom Crush, you're always going to have 1 less blue in your tribute, so it's worth the extra 10 seconds to run there and back. That blue adds a ton of gold per hour, especially if that ends up being a weapon. Now the nice thing that you can do with these tribute runs is if there is items in there, say like Tarnished Elvish Ring, you're able to sell these runs by peering into the tribute and not looting. Say there's rogues, for example, that want to get these items. You can then have them come into the instant, stealth all the way to the end here, and loot the ring for a paid price. A lot of times people are charging anywhere up to 50 gold for these ring runs. Kind of depends on per server. So that wraps up my full Dire Maul tribute run guide. I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial and can take something away for a future run. As I said before, this wasn't a speed run. The total runtime was actually 21 minutes, which I'm pretty happy with considering we did none of the speed skips, and I also stopped to explain some items along the way. Best thing to focus on is not getting frustrated during these runs, as every time you end up rushing, you're going to make a mistake and you're going to end up dying, and it's going to add way more time in your run. So just keep a cool head and relax. I think 3 nights in a row I logged off with my character dead, so I hope this guide can help you avoid that. One last thing to mention is the book spawn locations on your way out of the dungeon. The books offer a trinket for each class depending on which book you end up getting, and some will be more valuable and in demand over others. Each time you loot a book though, this isn't guaranteed to get one of these quest items. Sometimes you'll just get a couple of grays. The first spawn is actually right behind Cho, so after you loot the tribute cache, check behind him and the book could be right there. Second is below the ramp beside the pile of bones. This is where you use the invisibility pot. And last is outside in the courtyard behind the bush. If you enjoyed the content, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I look forward to seeing you in my next Hunter Handbook video. Good luck on your farming, and remember, feign death resist is just karma's way of getting back at you. Just kidding, but actually, yikes.